Hello and welcome back to Ultra Human. I didn't want to let too long go by without making another video, but I spent a significant chunk of the last week and a half being sick, and I'm still sort of getting over that. And I think there are a couple reasons that I got so sick. One of which being my oldest son just had a birthday, and we decided to have his birthday party at like an indoor pizza play place thing, and wow, that was a lot of fun, and it was we had a great time. Whenever you get around a bunch of sticky kid juices all covering every surface, I feel like you end up sick. So, that happened, and then right after that I got sick again, and then I just got sick again. So this is my third time being sick in the last 2 weeks. There's no excuse for that. And so, I wanted to make today's video about how to avoid breaking down from too much stress. Some things that we need to do to slow ourselves down and release some of those stressors. Because I do think that I have been kind of overloading myself between school and homeschooling my 3 kids that I have to take care of all day, and trying to do my YouTube channel and all these things. It's been a little much, and so I'm reminding myself, and I'd like to remind you guys of 3 things that we can do to reduce stress. And the first one that I wanted to talk about was to take time for quiet. And I wanted to make this distinct from taking time to meditate or to even really do something purposeful with that quiet. Literally just take time to be in a quiet space. Because I think that what happens when we're in a quiet space is that we get this opportunity to have a conversation with ourselves that we might be missing out on a lot of the time. Even meditation, which is great, and I think that this kind of inevitably happens while you're doing that, but the whole idea, and you might be stressing yourself out if you're having this conversation with yourself, because you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be quieting your mind, which is great too. And I think that if you have this quiet time and this conversation with yourself enough, then it becomes much easier when you go to do a practice like meditation to actually get that internal quiet, because you've already kind of talked things out with yourself, if you will. You and yourself have had all the conversations that need to be had, and you can just have a comfortable silence. And I think that's what makes meditation so hard for people, is that they are constantly bombarding themselves with input from, leaving on a podcast or listening to a movie or binge watching Netflix or whatever that thing is for you that's your noise. I might be listening to music even. If you have lyrics and active sound that's all activating your brain and keeping you occupied constantly, that's not how humans have evolved. It's only very recently, really with the advent of technology, where we have the opportunity to be constantly stimulated with external ideas and content constantly. We really need quiet space for ourselves. And that doesn't mean, I think that that's why introverts actually do so well in a lot of facets of life, is because they're just more aware that they need that quiet time than somebody who's an extrovert. A little more like myself. I'm constantly seeking having something going on, and it's that fear of missing out. Eventually you realize, like, what are you really missing out on? Is it really that great? But it's about becoming comfortable with yourself and becoming the kind of person that knows yourself. That's really going to allow you to kind of brings me into the next step, which is just doing less. Do less. That's step 2. Do less. This sounds simple and unachievable. How do you do less when so many of the things that we do are really responsibilities? Like, I have to take care of my kids. I have made a choice to homeschool them, and so I have to come up with lessons, and I have to sit down and take the time to do that. I've chosen to go to college while I'm doing all of this, and so I have to do that. I still work 1 day a week. I have to do that. You know, I could not do YouTube, but YouTube is where I'd like to make an independent living and then also make an impact on people's lives. So these are all things that I've committed myself to do, and there's more, of course. Any kind of social obligations. How am I ever supposed to hang out with friends if I have to do less? And I think that it's important to underachieve a little bit. Kind of the same idea of not constantly having inputs. You can't constantly expect yourself to have outputs either, or at least maybe not to the level. If you really look at what you do in a day, what do you actually put out in a day? I think that helps us set the gauge more where it should be, because I think that we all try and put a lot more on our plate than what we're really going to get done by the end of the day. And that's consistent. So if we can do 4 tasks in a day, like 4 significant tasks, and I'm obviously not talking about like, well, I brushed my teeth and I made lunch and dinner and skipped breakfast, so now I can read before bed. I'm not talking about those kind of tasks, but I'm saying like significant, big, chunking tasks. Like, for example, we're trying to go through our House in KonMari stuff. You can see up here, we could stand to lose a few things. All these shelves used to be just packed with junk. We put them up, and then immediately my partner just took everything that was on the kitchen counter and put them on these shelves. And it took me months to be like, no, we can't live like this. The whole reason we have the shelves is to have more space to actually store stuff, not necessarily knickknacks. But if I'm gonna do a big KonMari thing, like the other day we pulled out all the books in the house. That was an all-day project. I wasn't gonna try to get anything else done that day. Because, you know, sometimes you just can't. Maybe if you're a single person, you can get like 3 significant things done in a day. When you've got kids, you're really talking about like 1. You can get 1 big significant thing done in a day. And that's just the way it is, and we can't beat ourselves up for that all the time. And I think that it's already stressful enough that things take as long as they do. And I think that how people end up processing that is either procrastinating forever, in which case that thing is still there stressing you out that entire time. Or we just shame ourselves, like, well, we're not good enough because we haven't done this thing that's over our heads. And none of these things are really effective. So I think that if you just take everything off your plate and sort of reassess what it is real that you're going to be able to achieve in a day, take smaller bites, if you will, it's just going to unload so much stress. And then when you do less, it becomes a lot easier to make a timeline and make a plan for those bigger things that you might otherwise procrastinate or just assume that you can't do. You start seeing when you're not just shaming yourself that you didn't get the 10 things off of your to-do list today, and you start realizing that, wow, I'm really getting 1 big significant job done every day, and I can see the impact around me, and that will bring us into the next step. But when you start seeing the significant impact and giving yourself that mental reward for, like, you did that, you made a plan, you accomplished the thing, you did it, you got it out of the way, rather than just constantly shaming yourself for not getting the other 15 things done, it really gets things back on your plate. You'll find out you actually end up accomplishing a lot more because those long-term projects that you were putting off forever become the next thing to do. And step 3 is to aggressively clean up your space. Like I was just telling you sort of about these shelves, and it's happening to a lot of my home. We are dabbling in this idea of minimalism, but we are so far from being able to call ourselves minimalist, it's not even funny. Which is, I'm finding it a little bit ironic that, like for example, other than that lovely little microscope, all of the things on this shelf belong to my partner. Now that's fine, but he's the one who insists that I keep too much stuff. Now, I am naturally a stacker. That's a bad plan. So getting to a point where you really start aggressively cleaning out your space, and that means like I really like the KonMari method because I think that you give yourself permission. When I listen to a lot of like decluttering videos or anything like that, a lot of times they're really talking about like, well, what's the utility of the thing, and how, like, why are you keeping it? And I had a friend who had his rule was that for him to keep something, it had to serve at least 3 purposes. And I actually like that a lot. Because he made the point, one of those purposes could purely be, I like to look at it. So like he had, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that was his example. But certainly, I mean, like, okay, I don't know, this house plant. It cleans my air. It gives me something to do, and I like to look at it. This little guy, he is my son's toy. He keeps me company in the kitchen. And I like to look at it. I can't think of, is that another reason? But I mean, so if that's a good rule for you, then great. But in general, I like the whole KonMari idea of if it's bringing joy to your life, then feel free to keep it, and don't feel bad, don't feel guilty. Now, that might be a good gauge. If you're keeping it and you're telling yourself, yeah, it brings me joy, but you look at it and it makes you feel guilty, then it's not bringing you joy. And like, for example, my oldest son is 9, and I think that his grandmother, my partner's mom, went through a period of her life after losing her parents and her husband. She was an adult when she lost her parents, but it was all in the same year that she lost her husband. And she started to very neatly, like, she didn't have a disgusting house, but she basically started to hoard things. And she even started a business where she was selling antiques, which really meant that she was just buying buttloads of stuff from thrift stores and then stacking it in her house. And then not wanting to get rid of it unless she could sell it for more than she bought it for. So just pathologically too much stuff. And a lot of it was neat and valuable and everything, and a lot of it are things that we still have with us today, because they had some value somewhere, but when you have so much stuff that it's getting in your way from ever being able to relax, and then it's too much. It's not doing you any good. It's not serving its purpose. And I hear a lot of these videos about minimalism, and they're really talking about like the middle class. I am poor. I'm very, very poor. And I actually, in my experience, I almost think it's almost harder. I guess I don't know. I don't know because I'm not these other people. But in my experience, because of this country and because consumerism, because basically what's happening is the middle class is buying so much stuff. It gives us poor people a chance to buy used goods that have barely been used at such an undervalued rate when you think of the term in terms of like history, that we end up with just a bunch of stuff. And because poor people really are thinking about, well, what about if I run out of money? Like, I have to hang on to these kids' clothes because for the next 4 years until the next kid can fit it, because then I won't have to go spend the $30 on another pair of jeans. Like, that's a real concern when you're poor. And obviously, I mean, $30, you're talking about brand new jeans, but, you know, in my experience, trying to find something when your kid needs it and they're a specific size and you're trying to get it secondhand can be really hard. Literally, my younger son ran out of pants, and we had to call the grandparents and be like, hey, do you think you could help us out buying some pants for my kid? Like, that's how poor, you know, our family, but lots of people are in that position. And I have to be kind of grateful because people who are middle class, they're gonna go acquire that new thing with a credit card. Whereas when we're out of money, we're actually out of money. So just to bring that all around, I think that because of that sense of scarcity, it makes people in our position more likely to sort of neurotically hang on to things that we think we might use to either save money or something. Or something. That's so many of the things that you find when you really start to clean out your place are like, yeah, this is, why do I have all of these bread ties? Like the things that keep the bag of bread closed, why did I keep those? What was I thinking was going to happen with those one day? And legitimately, you can use them to label your cords. It's the only use I've found for them. It's nice for arts and craft supplies. but I mean, aggressively cleaning out your space, it gives you room to breathe. If you only have enough dishes that when all the dishes are dirty, the sink's not overflowing onto your counters, for example, and you have space to like do those dishes and put them all away again. That's another like poor people problems. You just stack the dishes on the counter, and then when you're done, you get more dishes out of the cabinet. I see this happen in a lot of people's houses, not just me. So thank you for joining me today, and there are my 3 suggestions on how to lower your stress. 1, take time for quiet. 2, just do less. And 3, aggressively clear out your space. Clear space, clear mind. Cleanliness is next to godliness, whatever you want to call it. It really does help for that relief and relaxation. And so I hope you're all out there trying to be your best humans. I'm gonna do my best back here, and we will see you next week.